Archana, over to you.
Very good evening and a warm welcome to everyone who joined in for our virtual session today as a part of our Beyond Work initiative for our expert network, the future of healthcare, InfoTech, and BioTech Gamechangers. The session today will be in a fireside chat format between both our esteemed speakers who had extensive experience in the healthcare space and will be moderated by our co-founder and director, Mr. Deepak Nalkani. I'll start off by introducing our speakers for today. They're both leaders in the healthcare industry, Mr. Sudhir B and Dr. Purav Gandhi. Dr. Purav is a physician entrepreneur currently leading a global management consulting firm called Health Art Insights, which is focused on strategy, analytics, and digital transformation. He's also a founder, investor, and strategic advisor for some healthcare innovators, including Vox Analytics, Admino Healthcare, Insights 10, which is an AI-driven market research firm. He's also had experience working in the consulting space with Deloitte and has a strong understanding of the medical devices manufacturing landscape in India, including the key drivers, challenges, manufacturing clusters, success stories, processes, among others. Welcome, Dr. Purav Gandhi. Sudhir is a senior healthcare executive with 3 decades of management and entrepreneurial experience across a wide spectrum of healthcare verticals globally. Sudhir has expertise in scale-ups, startups, and business turnaround situations in companies in India and international markets. He served in the senior management teams of GE Healthcare, Apollo Hospitals, and ICICI Venture PE Fund, among other leading companies. Welcome back, Mr. Sudhir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
And for this evening's moderator, we have none other than our co-founder who incubated IndusGuru, an online curated marketplace for independent consultants. He has been the lead partner of management consulting in PwC India and responsible for its digital business transformation services. Prior to that, he has also over 21 years of consulting experience in Accenture, working with a variety of multinational and cross-cultural project teams. I now request Deepak to introduce today's event topic and touch upon the themes of this knowledge sharing session.
Thanks, Archana, and welcome everyone. Welcome to this fireside chat that we have conceptualized over the last few weeks for you. I'll start off with sharing some context about how we thought about this session. Over the last few months, we've been having monthly sessions by our experts for our expert network. Now at IndusGuru, we have experts across several different industries, almost 30 different industry sectors. So we thought, let's do a session on a sector that impacts all of us very closely and personally. And that is something to celebrate the new year and also, fingers crossed, celebrate the passing of the pandemic. So we thought, let's talk about the healthcare sector and talk about the future of healthcare. Now, like any other sector, we really can't talk about the future if we don't talk about digital. But besides digital, healthcare is actually being impacted today by 2 very fundamental, powerful forces. One of them is really the advances in biotechnology and all the related aspects around precision medicine, genetic engineering, and so on. And that has really shaped our growing ability to shape our own genetic code. Second, the slowly but sure aging of societies. And this is happening across the world. While India is called the youngest big nation today, even India is aging. It's forecasted that by 2050, 1 in 6 people in the world will be above the age of 60. Today, it's probably half that. So really, aging of societies is a big healthcare challenge around the globe. Now, to address such a large, wide, and complex subject, I'm delighted to really have 2 healthcare veterans who spend their entire careers in the healthcare sector from many different viewpoints. We have, of course, Dr. Purav Gandhi, who's a doctor as well as a consultant, a strategy consultant. So he'll get his own unique perspectives to the subject. And then we have Sudhir B, who's an operator of healthcare companies, he's an investor, he's been an entrepreneur. So multifarious different perspectives around the healthcare domain. So that's really our panel for today, our friends on the fireside chat. And also we have a very diverse audience, I know. We have people from our expert network. We have some people who are clients and entrepreneurs. We also have some students. So it's great to have you all on board. And I recognize that we have to make this session as relevant and accessible to all of you. And I trust Purav and Sudhir will really help us do that. So without further ado, let me move on to getting warmed up. I think really all discussions on healthcare in recent times have centered around the pandemic. And I believe that the pandemic would change healthcare and the pharma world forever. But as we emerge gradually out of it, obviously the reality is a little bit different. So let me start off by asking Purav as to really what were the imagined disruptions that would happen. What has stood the test of time? What's going to really be sustainable? What has really been a bit of hype? Over to you, Purav, to start off this discussion.
Thank you, Deepak. As you introduced me as a veteran, I feel very old. Like you said, the entire population is aging, and I feel I am also aging. Very interestingly, 10-15 years ago, there was no such sector within healthcare and life sciences, but now there is a sector called as anti-aging. Technology has moved so far that it's a dedicated sector now where there is a lot of research going on. But more on that later. To come to your question, the pandemic, of course, was a very sad and a very challenging event. But in some sense, great progress is always defined by such calamities. And in that sense, the pandemic played its role in terms of coming as a big challenge, a big calamity, but also a defining moment. So because of the scarcity in terms of need for healthcare, need for access, everything had to accelerate. And what happened is, in that, everything moved very fast. There was a lot of hype, and things stood the test of time and got successful very fast, but also faded out very fast. So one big mega theme was digital, where everybody believed that everything will be digital. And really, there was overhype. Everybody believed that if you don't have a mobile app, you will die. That is the only way business would be done in healthcare. And as the hype fades away, we see that that's not real. Still, 90% or more than 95% of healthcare consultations happen physically, where the doctor sees the patients, examines them. So the world, the entire overhype of digital has died. But also in that process, a lot of digital technologies have matured. And the ones which are really mature, I feel me or anyone will find it very hard to define because they become ubiquitous. They just disappear in the background. They become part of your life and you no longer can see or feel them. And those are the real digital technologies that have matured. Also, a lot of maturity has come in place in terms of things which people don't see. So healthcare supply chain now has become much more robust as opposed to what it was 2 to 3 years ago, because deficiencies were quickly highlighted and got resolved. The research process itself has become way more robust because drugs and vaccines here were approved in unprecedented short time intervals, which were not done before. The overall market access process. So when I used to study medicine, people said this, right? That from the time a new medicine is invented and released in the market, it takes 5 to 10 years for it to get adopted in the Western world. And then 5 to 10 more years for that to get adopted in a country like India. So almost a 20-year cycle. Now it just happens in parallel. There is no lag. Sometimes countries like India are early adopters. And that was proven at scale during this pandemic. So in some sense, we could go technology by technology, but there are some things which have stood the test of time. They have become ubiquitous, so you don't see them. And then there are things which were overhyped, where there was a lot of frenzy, a fear of missing out, like some very obvious intuitive digital trends like telemedicine. It's obvious, everybody finds it easy to jump onto that trend. Those have kind of faded away because they were overhyped. So that's what I feel has happened coming out of the pandemic.
Thanks, Purav. That's a great reality check and interesting points that these are ubiquitous things which are happening in the background in the industry, which many of us are not yet aware. So these your thoughts on the same topic. What has really stayed? What's likely to be a fundamental shift continuing after the pandemic?
So I think, Deepak, thanks for giving this opportunity to speak to such an elite audience. But from my perspective, we have to also see what happened during the pandemic. So what word got was like close to 7 billion doctors. Every patient was a doctor because they had some, SPO2 or, measuring devices, and they thought, now we know how to manage our health. So I want to clearly say I'm very glad that I'm sharing this platform with Purav, who's a doctor. Nobody should ever think that any technology can replace a doctor. See, in a healthcare system, doctor is the soul. So what we can create is access, enablement, automation, efficiency improvement. But I remember a lot of people claiming that they have some medicine which can cure, some claiming we have AI tools where we don't need a doctor, we don't need a pathologist, that is never going to happen, at least in our lifetime. And we are not that old, but still at least next 50 years is not going to happen. So I think a lot of technologies came, a lot of innovations came, but what is going to stay is, one of the biggest things is digital adaptation. I have seen myself, late 90s when we were doing the technology thing within healthcare systems, especially hospitals, the adaptation was very slow, and especially doctors' time to adaptation was very high. It will take 3 to 5 years to implement a EMR or EMS, whatever we call it. But during the pandemic, we all were forced. Like it was like a doctor had to come on a video consult. Patient had to get a consult on video, because I know a generation which is our parents 80 plus. They were never comfortable unless a doctor touches them and takes their pulse and all that, but even they were also on the video calls. So that entire technology adoption in the healthcare system has been great. Probably what would have taken 20, 25 years has happened in those 18 months. So I think that is going to stay, and we still see hybrid systems. Sometimes patients who are slightly immobile, they're okay now going on Zoom calls. And I'm sure you all know in Mumbai, Delhi, Ahmedabad, all cities, how old patients will be taken to the hospital in a wheelchair. So I think that is one thing which is going to stay with us, which is a great thing technology did. Then another thing which very, very important and visible is point of care access. So there has been a lot of point of care innovation. I think there are many young startups in India as well as, across the globe, which came together to come with point of care testing devices. We now have a home COVID testing, which we never thought. And when we speak to those companies, we realize that probably in 5 years, we may not need to go to pathology labs, or in my case, some IVF clinics to get some basic tests done. So that point of care device technology is going to stay. It is convenient and it has gained that accuracy, as the Purav gave example of vaccines. Like the entire discovery cycle has moved from 15 years to probably 15 months. We should always say that sometimes tough times they teach us. So these are the couple of lessons, Deepak, which I think came, and some of them will stay, and some of them I think will fade away because they were actually all my life I've learned from doctors. So I always say that never think of replacing a doctor. We can only accelerate their performance and their productivity. That's it. So those are my point of view.
Thanks, Sudhir. I think you preempted one of the questions I was going to ask, but let me come to that later then. But that's a good segue into talking about digital. And if you go by some of the mainstream media now in business, Forbes had a recent article about the future trends in 2023, and everything was about connected care, AI, telehealth, and so on. So it looks like everything is going digital, and maybe this is a more developed country view of the world. Having said that, we see a lot of that here. So it's easy to mix up the hype versus reality, as you are rightly saying. But I think the best sanity check can be done by someone who's put their money where their mouth is as an investor. So maybe, Sudhir, from your experience across many different business models, it'll be good if you can tell us what might be some of what you think are the fundamental game-changing technologies in digital that can be scaled up, besides the telehealth, which is now spoken of so much. But what are some of the other technologies that you think around digital that in health, which can be scaled up?
So in my career, I primarily focused on diagnostics and infertility. So I can speak and share my learnings about these two. And of course,
Yeah.
within hospital system, there is, I think one of the shift which I already spoke is the point of care devices,
Right.
which is going to be a huge benefit both for the provider network and for the patient from the cost and convenience perspective. So that is one trend which is going to stay definitely. Then EMR adaptation, like, I remember in 2002, we kind of worked with Apollo, Max, Fortis, and the dream was to have our EMR on a chip. And this became this thing that like a credit card, anybody can carry it on a chip and all that. I think that part, now it is cloud-based. Those same cloud. So I think those cloud-based technologies, which are SaaS and information carrier, will definitely stay because again, it's convenient and in times of emergency, this is something which is very useful. And third, which is incidentally, I was with a very senior entrepreneur in the genomics space this morning. And one of the things we were discussing is the predictive medicine will definitely change its entire, it will change actually the trajectory of healthcare because a lot of genetic research companies also, thanks to vaccination research program being so successful worldwide, they are able to accelerate their own protocols also. And then pure technology wise, as I say, from the enablement and access creation, like today, a patient sitting in Guwahati can talk to a very senior IVF specialist in Chandigarh, or a patient sitting in somewhere in Calcutta can speak to somebody and this is now happening, and this is people are comfortable. Finally, I think that should be definitely in the thing, and I'll welcome some audience views. AI will play a big role, and a lot on the data analytics side and the predictive medicine. On the therapy side, I don't think we are getting into something that will have some tool which will give us the right, therapeutic guidance. Rather, they'll give us the guidance, but not the therapy. So these are the few points I have from the digital adaptation perspective.
Great, Sudhir. I think that's a fairly wide spectrum of technologies and interventions you talked about. But let me ask you.
Coming to the investment part where you started.
Yeah.
The valuation which peaked very highly and now come to ground levels, all the companies which raise a lot of money on digital thing, now if we see the market, and it is a fact, and they are all very young, smart entrepreneurs. They really created great business models. So nothing to say that they were not doing wrong, but the moment COVID went over and suddenly people wanted to be near normal, it's still not normal, I hope, in the next 6 months. Except the traffic in Bangalore, Mumbai, and Delhi, nothing is normal, So I would say that from an investment perspective, a lot of moderation and right valuation matrices are being now coming to be visible, and this will also change the course of how entire healthcare industry financials work. But we have to wait another 6 months.
As people say, Sudhir, this is probably the right time to enter if valuations have been corrected. So if you were asked to pick your best bet, a technology to invest in at this time, what would you say to our participants?
I would say that I would, as I say, I specialize in 2-3 industries, so I can speak about them. But I would put my dollars in regenerative medicine and longevity of the life programs. And a lot of good work happening on stem cell therapy, a lot of work happening on the life longevity programs, which sound like a wellness program, but they're actually managing your health on a very periodic basis, predefined periodic basis. And that is another thing now, the pathology tests, patients, volunteers, especially diabetics. Earlier, it was that family was pushing or, doctor was pushing to get a test done. But during COVID, because immunocompromised people had to actually go or needed some kind of special care, so they are now taking better care of them. In fact, I'll recommend everybody to read a book called Survival of the Sickest. I read that book almost 7 years back, and it's a very different thing. It has nothing to do with pandemic, but it somewhere concludes that sick people survive longer because they take better care of their health. So it's a contradiction, but that's something in the book I learned a couple of years back.
Yeah, truly a contrarian recommendation. Hopefully, some of the audience may put it on their reading list. Thanks, Sudhir. It's interesting, and maybe we'll talk of this life longevity a little bit later. But let me switch it to Purav, who, as in his role as strategy consultant, also evaluates many different things around the whole digital space. And I know I have talked to you, Purav, and maybe you said at some point we will have more sensors in our body than our electronics in our car today. But that sounds futuristic. But tell us, what are some of the interesting use cases that you have seen, which might you think be relevant in the next 3 to 5 years?
Deepak, so a couple of areas. I mean, Sudhir highlighted many relevant areas where I think there is a lot of progress in the digital world. If I were to add a couple of them, one would be this entire space around automation and robotics has kind of progressed significantly nowadays. And it's important to understand automation is not an end-to-end automation of everything, but it adds value. It kind of minimizes labor. Sometimes it helps you access things which are otherwise inaccessible. So for example, these keyhole surgeries where you enter a laparoscope through a simple hole. Now, typically you need to, for people who have not seen surgeries live, right? You need to cut and make a large incision, because when you have to ligate an artery, essentially you'll have to use 2 hands, because you can't tie a knot with 1 hand. It's impossible. And you need to use at least 2 to 3 fingers. So the hole that you need to make, or the cut you need to make, has to be very large. And then you need to cut muscles and go deeper and deeper. But what if through 2 holes you can insert something which can open inside and has hands? And that's kind of the basic principle of laparoscopic and robotic surgery. And now through very simple kind of instructions, you could make that robot see and identify an artery which is bleeding, tie a knot. Now people sitting in a different place can actually participate and assist in the surgery because of seamless 5G network. So that entire automation piece, and surgery is an example, but same piece within pathology, within radiology, within IVF, everywhere plays a role. How you kind of automate some laboratory procedures, how you automate cleaning of an OT, how you make it more consistent. So that entire piece is one. Second, the research process has become way more robust. So clinical trials are very different now, right? They are decentralized. Historically, they used to rotate around a hospital. They were centralized. So patient would come to hospital at a defined interval every 10 days, 20 days, 30 days. And on that day, a detailed checkup will be done and documented, and that will define whether a drug is working or not. But now, because of sensors, we are able to see whether the drug is working every day or not just on that particular day, on that particular lab test. So the kind of things you can track as outcomes and that you would want to solve as a treatment company has become way more sophisticated. So in terms of, again, digital technology, that, in my opinion, has progressed a lot. Then there are sensors. The one challenge I feel, and again, so there's a venture capitalist, has been on the investment side, so I have to check myself, but is the entire investment hype and the pressure it creates on sometimes otherwise good technologies. So for example, for a long time, my thesis was that telemedicine is a very, very valuable branch of medicine. And now, because of excessive valuations and media hype, these companies, in some sense, got caught in a rut to grow at some 100%, 500%, 800% every year. And in that process, then they try to sensationalize their business model, made fundamentally poor choices, because of which a whole sector suffers today, which could otherwise have been a great boon. So in some sense, the investment cycles and hypes also kill otherwise perfectly great technologies and at one point, AI also faced a similar risk because crazy valuations were given to AI, and this thought that today AI can replace 50 doctors, 5,000 doctors, and because of that, all pathologists will become irrelevant. So those kind of crazy hype cycles otherwise destroy great digital technologies, and we have to hope that does not happen. As pure somebody from the field, somebody who's also associated with academia, I feel that I will pray that that does not happen. So that's again one important trend from a digital perspective to take note of.
A very good point, Purav. Thanks. I think that's a very interesting point to note on how economics and business can kill a technology or make it really flourish in the way it could. And that sort of brings me to the other point, which was mentioned a few times by both of you all about AI, and that is probably the biggest hype today. I mean, in all sectors and nothing more than in our daily lives, where now in all our popular imagination, Google is being replaced by ChatGPT, which answers every question for us. So that I'm tempted to ask, I mean, yes, it sounds sacrilege. In the future, will we have doctors? Will we consult doctors at all? Will we have family physicians, or will we have Dr. AI? ChatGPT today, if it can answer so much, tomorrow couldn't. What do you feel about it? And maybe I'll ask Purav, you're a doctor, and what do you see in the future? I know in our audience, we have a few doctors too.
Would love to hear other opinions, but
Purav, over to you. Yeah.
Sure, Deepak. So, would love to hear other opinions, but I think this is just natural evolution. So, in my opinion, to kind of give us a simple answer, no, AI won't replace doctors, but AI will be an integral part. So, I'll tell a simple story. So, back in the day when I was in med school, overhead projectors were something which were introduced recently. And teachers who used to teach on chalk, with chalk and whiteboard and blackboards did not like it. But that was the future. And then 5 years later, PowerPoint was the future, and people were not willing to get on board. I had professors complain all the time that do we teach or do we build PowerPoints? It's either or, right? And then it was the same for mobile apps, and now it's the same for AI. So it's very important. It's existential in some way to know what AI can and cannot do. Everyone does not need to be a Python developer. But if you don't understand where AI works and where it does not, you would become irrelevant very quickly. And same applies for doctors. But if they do, then doctors could be very, very potent, very powerful, very could contribute and add a lot more value going forward. And I'll give some examples. So for example, a doctor right now has to do a lot of manual work in terms of writing papers, etc., to treat a patient, collecting history. All that could go away if they could apply automation meaningfully. If they could use differential diagnosis on a radiology scan, and a lot of companies like GE and Siemens provide that even today. So instead of fighting that, knowing where it will work and it will not work will make doctors very potent. Second, the kind of skills a doctor will require will change over time. So back in the day, a brain surgery would not last in minutes or hours. It will last in days, like you'll turn calendar pages within one single surgery. And somebody with great amount of physical stamina and endurance would be a good neurosurgeon. But tomorrow, somebody who has great tactile skills and is adept at playing video games will become a better brain surgeon as opposed to somebody who has great concentration over 36 hours. So how fighter pilot's role has changed, right? Where everything is about how fast you can navigate instead of the kind of physical flying skills you needed. Maybe the kind of skills that every branch of medicine will require will change. Doctors might need to have better counseling skills, maybe better handwriting. That seems hard. But as compared to what they needed before, right? A lot of calculation and math could now be done by software. So the skills of being a great doctor versus an average one will definitely migrate. But the role of a doctor will not diminish. It will just change.
Excellent, Purav. And also timely reminder that the skills that our children get by playing video games are not all that bad. I mean, they can have their relevance in the new world. But so drawing on the same theme, Sudhir, asking you a little bit of a corollary question. With so much of data about everyone available, you talked about the EMR, which was holy grail in the old days. There is also the concern about data privacy. And at some point, maybe with all these sensors and monitoring, our insurance agency will know more about our body than we do.
They already know, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've probably explored these business models from various sides. What is your perspective on this? What are the implications for us?
So one thing I say, which you said, Chat GPT, how I hope it doesn't become a reality, because it will kill the romance of living, Then, in many nuclear families now, people talk less to each other, but more to Alexa or Siri, So I hope that doesn't start happening. And there is a huge social impact of these technologies, which probably we need a different session. But I think if we take a balance of that in the healthcare industry, the knowledge databases will be very, very important now. But where is the sanitized data? I mean, you pick up some you take example, the simplest thing, which we all know, pathology tests now. Everybody says mine is 5.3, 5.9, but every company is using a different reference point. So a normal patient who is not exposed to healthcare suddenly gets panicky saying, oh, my parameter is 800. But it doesn't realize that this particular reagent company or lab is using a different reference range. Whereas doctor brings that intelligence to the paper. So to take forward, there is a lot of non-productive work which our doctors were forced to do because of lack of infrastructure. So what will happen is they'll be able to focus more on the patients. And especially for chronic illness, doctors will be more enabled to take better decisions, and which hopefully should lead to some superior outcomes. That's something which digital from the doctor's perspective will do. And Purav, you brought a very important point of the surgery. Laparoscopic surgery exists for almost 25 years. In fact, a lot of now senior doctors are moving to robotics. I was surprised. I'm just speaking to somebody on the robotics right now. In India, there are 4 companies which have actually developed their own robot in the last 18 months. And can you believe 80 robotic systems have been bought in India in last 12 months versus 10 in last 8 years. This is how this entire precision surgery, and what it helps is increase the doctor productivity. So I think that is one more point. Now coming to the data privacy and all that, I think we all feel very invaded already. I mean, there are side chats saying that Apple and Samsung listening to what all we are speaking. And I've seen in some of the countries outside India, not now, but in early 2020, like 2014-15, mobile phones needed to be left outside the room. And I never could understand the logic, but I was told that no, this can be a privacy issue. But from there, we are coming to a stage. We all read that joke on the WhatsApp. We're saying that Siri will order a pizza for you. Somebody give you a diet advice and then say you don't eat. If you eat, what happens? So while that will become somewhere reality, but a lot of that is a hype, because it depends how much we want the devices to invade our physical space. Today, our mental space has been taken away by devices. I was reading some guy recently saying that in olden time, fasting was going away from this place, no, without water and food. These days, you be away from WhatsApp, that is a fast for the day. So that invasiveness, I think, and then there is another risk, which we recently saw a very bad example in AIMS, which was the cyber hacking. Ultimately, this entire data, especially of the prominent people in every industry, every sector, be it political, business, social life, it's all is a private data, and unless huge, it will of course give rise to one more new business, which is the cyber security, which will become, people will become very aware. But I think we have that risk. But coming back to first point before I close this, data is there, but this data, can we get the information? We don't know, because the entire data sets have not been sanitized or normalized, and unless there's a government coming, which is saying, like, I know one place, Middle East, Dubai actually did this entire insurance sanitization way back in 2014. And they are now so advanced, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and UAE, that there the insurance works on the same platform. So whether I go to X hospital, Y or Z, ABC doctor, the data is sanitized in the backend on the entire data pool. So I think that is one challenge for a vast country like India. And there are good examples in hospital groups who are investing a lot of money in technology and cybersecurity. But interoperability is a bigger challenge, I think. So these are my point of view.
Great, Sudhir. Thanks. I think both of you all good cautionary input that, I mean, while a lot of things we may want to remain the same, we can't ignore the transformative capacity of these digital technologies and data, and therefore the skills that are required in the future, the types of systems we'll have to place to leverage them, as you're saying, Sudhir, will need to be different. Great. So thanks for those perspectives. I think we wanted to sort of change tracks a little bit, but before that, maybe let me pause and take some audience questions, if any, at this stage, because we have had a rich, insightful discussion around the whole implication of digital and technology. So any questions from the audience at this stage? While do we have any, or I could also pick on some folks from the audience to share some observations. While are there any questions in Archana, or should I just maybe I can request one of my old colleagues, KK, I see on the call. He leads a company called Equalize Health, which is a global firm dedicated to equalizing or enabling access for all types of healthcare. KK, are you there and want to share some observations around this project?
Hi, Neeraj, are you wanting to ask a question?
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Great. Neeraj. Hi,
Hey,
Neeraj.
hi, Deepak. Hi.
Hi.
So somehow, baya, I got this invite and I said, okay, it's worth attending after a long time. So I'm not going to take a lot of time. Thank you, guys. I think it was a very informative session. I dedicatedly work on sensor space right now, particularly continuous glucose monitoring, and I think you already touched base. So the question that I have to the to both of you, in fact, Sudhir and Purav, around how you see the metabolic health restoration program that is now largely being shaped in last 12 months time going to impact the care mechanism in time to come, because it's more focused on wellness. But as you said it right now, people are talking about diabetes reversal, and I've been interacting with people where they're talking about even hypertension reversal and lipid reversal, so which is something that we never heard, but now people are conducting clinical trials and they're trying to do. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think, Purav, let you start this because you're a doctor also, so you'll be more credible in answering this.
Well, I'll just say, look, some of these trends, they are very exciting, especially diabetes reversal is where I have done some work. I have understood some of the metabolism part of it as well, where it's no longer anecdotal. Now there are clinical studies and trials which are proving that. Hopefully it will also scale very fast. But in general, right, I think as any society progresses, there are two stages, and this is a bit more philosophical than kind of factual, right? But the first set of disorders that you would have as a society progresses is you would move from undernourishment, malnourishment, and infectious diseases to metabolic disorders. And then the next wave of progress is you will solve for issues like longevity, where now the challenges that you need to solve for are more on the lines of either oncology or immunology per se. At this stage, while these therapies are promising, at least the statistics or epidemiology numbers don't indicate that we are going to get there in 5 to 10 years, because the reversals are still in small pockets. We are still at an early stage where most of the people are getting diagnosed early or timely. But as we solve that, hopefully reversal programs, more effective treatments, will apply at a scale, and then we as a society would have solved for it, like we have solved for vaccination, infectious diseases, and then move to solving oncology, immunology, and then longevity. So the therapies are promising, Neeraj. There is no doubt about that. The time to scale, I'm hoping, will be shorter, but at this stage, it looks to me like at least 5 to 10 years.
Thank you, Dr. Purav. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks, Neeraj. I think we have another question here, which maybe I will direct first to Sudhir by Mr. Menon, Mr. PVG Menon. He asks, is the reliance on digital test data making doctors less adept at diagnosis? Earlier, doctors diagnosed by talking to the patient, looking at the pulse color of their eyes, etc. Today, for everything, doctors ask you to do a test. Could this be a business model issue, as you have to refer to specific labs? So we are looking at doctors becoming data processing experts rather than diagnostic physicians. Is that a real risk? And I've heard of you all talking about this as defensive medicine. So Sudhir, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think when we had the last session, we spoke about defensive medicine, but there are multiple parameters which are leading. This was existing earlier also, but this was to a set of patients. Now everybody is aware. As I said, that what COVID has done is 8 billion doctors around the world. Everybody is a doctor, so they feel. But yes, there are pros and cons. I feel a right diagnostic test is always a preventive measure not to do any wrong diagnosis. So yes, doctors are being very cautious about it. We should also appreciate one thing, that during COVID, we saw that first 4 weeks, nobody actually could understand what is this happening. I mean, we heard there's a treatment which has come in California, and same we said has come in Jaipur also. And somebody said Guntur also, doctors, because they were working in isolated this thing. Now, I think Purav touched it from the research perspective, but on the healthcare delivery side also, there are good forums now available where they're saying, why don't we exchange data whenever you see something new, a virus coming or bacteria coming. So rather than just depending upon physical parameters, better to get a diagnostic test done. And yes, I agree, somewhere we have over-diagnosis, but I think we are trying to prevent a health catastrophe with it. And these are my views. Purav, you have any point in view?
I have to jump in, like even if Deepak says no, I have to jump into this, right? But like, look, if you were sick or if I was sick, what would I prefer? Evidence-based medicine or anecdotal medicine? So if Deepak says that, look, there are two ways. One, I can test you and be sure you are sick, and then based on that, give you a medicine. Or let's try the pink first, then blue, then the green one. I would choose the test, right? So evidence-based medicine is where we have evolved as society, and that's where tests come in. They are there for a reason. Now, like any other industry, there are bad apples and there are bad practices. So sometimes doctors do it because of incentive issues, and some of them do it. There is no denying that. Sometimes doctors also practice a bit of defensive medicine. Sometimes some doctors are in general a little more conservative in nature. So if Sudhir is a patient, I was like, look, it's a VIP patient, he's affording, let me do 5 extra tests because Sudhir can afford and I don't want to miss out a by chance finding. So there are all those factors and judgments at play here. It's not always an incentive issue. There are a bunch of other factors at play as well. So doctors relying on data, if that is a trend, I would be super happy. I would be thrilled about it instead of them treating me on whims and fancies. There are some challenges like any other practice would have, medicine has, and hopefully they will get corrected over time. But for everyone, right? Instead of not doing a test is a better outcome mostly, as long as it is in basic affordable range.
Thanks, Purav. I think a timely reminder that we should not be bashing all types of doctor practices. The intent is to improve outcomes effectively. But yes, these are things that every consumer faces oftentimes. So thanks, Mr. Menon, for picking up that point. Let's switch on to the next part of our session, which is now moving on from the digital agenda to, may I say, the biotech agenda, right? So that's the other big trend that's forecasted to really change our lives and health. Biotech, and particularly the aspect of it which touches upon genetic medicine, genetic engineering, based on the understanding of DNA and our gene. And a lot of Purav, I mean, this is again an area of so much difficult terms for a layman to understand. There's gene editing and CRISPR technologies, and all that sounds close to sci-fi. Can you help us understand this in a bit simpler terms? And also, when do we really see this start making an impact in our personal lives?
Yeah. So, Deepak, I think I would say it's already making an impact in our personal lives today. And there are a bunch of treatments. And again, I'm also not an expert, like doctors know what to prescribe when, but the entire science and the mechanics of it, doctors also don't understand. You can only pretend so much. But the genetic treatments, right? So there are a bunch of them, one which treat complex diseases like AIDS and can treat a virus, which historically was very hard. Then there are technologies which can treat a cancer by reversing gene mutations or countering them. Then there are gene editing, which could fix deficiencies which are genetic in nature. Then there are treatments which would fix autoimmune conditions where your gene has been hyperactivated or hypoactivated. It will fix that. All these technologies are progressing at a very good pace. So for example, this medicine Keytruda, which is approved for lung cancer and now being tested for breast cancer, is one of those chemotherapeutic agents which has a fundamentally different mechanism to treat cancer, and the survival rates are much longer because it is way more targeted in nature. Recently, one of the gene therapies, last year it got approved, is for hemophilia. This is a one-shot gene therapy where it modifies your gene and fixes hemophilia for good. It was in the news because it is the most expensive treatment approved till date, probably in $300,000 range for just one single dose, but it can treat hemophilia with some success rate of more than 85 to 90%. So these therapies are already coming to market. They are very expensive today because of two main reasons. One is the R&D cycle is very expensive and companies need to recover the cost because
उधर से अपने को 11 वाला मेरे को देखने का.
Sorry for this. Someone could please put themselves on mute who's not. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Purav.
So one of the as I was sorry, I lost the track, but anyway, so what I was saying was these treatments they are very expensive because of two main reasons. One is the extremely expensive investment cycles that companies have to invest, and the success rate is also very low. So 1 in 1,000, 1 in 5,000 molecules or technologies would succeed as of today. So the overall cost when you accumulate is more than $1 billion to get one treatment to market. The second, the manufacturing is also in small batches. So the manufacturing technology again is very expensive. But as we saw with COVID vaccine, with volumes, the cost does come down. So these treatments are real. They are not sci-fi. They are not so far away. They are coming to market every year. Every year, as of today, the FDA approves 5 to 10 such treatments. Hopefully, they will approve a lot more. They will become a lot more cost-effective as well over time.
God, well, thanks for those very real examples, which sort of tell us that this is not simply science fiction, but it will really start impacting our lives. And now it is probably doing so in some of these very rare conditions. But soon, and maybe we talk about that as we go ahead on the bigger challenges that medicine faces. We'll probably see some impact there too. But let me just switch tracks a little bit back to, we have talked about a lot of these things. One could say very advanced concepts in healthcare and medicine, impact of digital, impact of biotech. But at one level, being in India, we know that access to simple basic healthcare is also a challenge for a very large majority of our population. And the pandemic exposed that like never before. And some people say that there is a problem with the purely hospital-centric model of healthcare. The healthcare is something which need not be only confined to what a big infrastructure hospital can do. And so on that front, maybe Sudhir, I will ask you, what do you think might be some of the way ahead for India, particularly, and you talked about equitable access and providing access being enabled by technology. And we know the government has a fairly ambitious mission around the Ayushman Bharat Digital Health Mission. Tell us about what you think will be the most meaningful impacts of this mission in terms of access to health, and is there a different model for the hospital of the future?
Yeah, so one of the things, the way entire healthcare system was developed in India was, quaternary care, tertiary care, secondary care, primary care. Because of various reasons, tertiary care and quaternary care actually got limited to large cities. And there's a huge social cycle around it. The doctors, their families would like to be in large cities because they want to have access to education and many other social advantages what they get there. So always the far off or remote areas are always feeling challenge around even the good secondary care was missing. If we look at 90s, when we started building, then came in private healthcare, and I think they started creating access in tier 2 towns, as we call it. But if you ask me, even today, the remote areas or a major part of the population, which is in a core rural segment, is still an issue. Of course, what also happened that during pandemic, due to people's adaptability to technology, some remote consultation increased, and I know a couple of teleradiology and telemedicine companies where the adaptation was higher in these rural areas because there was no doctor anyway physically. So their thing was only to hook onto a bandwidth, and Ayushman Bharat has played a very positive role in one is while the access is created, but awareness has been created. We should also feel today if there is an onco patient in a city, they can go and visit any facility, they can call somebody and understand. But in rural segment, I don't know if you guys know, in 2005, there was a train which used to go from Ganganagar in Rajasthan to Punjab. It was called cancer train. So if you get into that train, you will see all the people from those areas are going to larger cities, and 90% of cancer patients. Now things are changing because remote diagnosis is becoming a possibility. It's not the possibility, it's a possibility. Second thing, with government coming is very smart and strong program on digital health, we call it mission or the policy. It will create that equitable access. I mean, the intent is very nice, and the way things are getting implemented, there's a lot of hope. This is the first time, at a national level, we have something like this, which there is a incentive being given now. If you all know that they're saying if you keep a digital data to smaller centers, there is a incentive in terms not only which is soft, but it is money also being given by the government, which are very, very good programs. But fundamentally, that shift happening, I think it will take a decade's time. And also, we should be very aware while we are aging, but our average life has increased from 53 to 78 already. And we are still talking about the longevity. The new longevity is not increasing your old age. That will be painful. Like at 85, if somebody has dementia, you don't want, God forbid, anyone, if we get dementia, we should not live till 100, it will be a problem for the society. So the entire focus is keeping people well and healthy in their prime years so that when they age, then age-related issues are less damaging to them. And that's where the digital records will play a major role. I mean, I was going through the draft which came just 3 months back, and it is under review now by the government. The digital health program, and it actually, incidentally, the earlier session taking the data privacy, which actually addresses the data privacy issue also. With such a good platform being created by, in cities, we don't need this because this exists for 10 years. But I mean, it's just that 3% of the population. What about the 97%? So I have a feeling this will be a big game changer. And Ayushman is already, that program is already showing its own positive things. And there is another thing, which is a, if you know these agencies which work, they have now real data. See, when government becomes a provider to 700 million people, at least that data will be very, very accurate, or the degree of accuracy will increase. It's no more a Excel or a PowerPoint data. And with that data, whether we get into gene therapy, or you get into the population-wise, statistics on how to manage pandemics, that's a lot. So I have a feeling that in the next 5 years, we should be there, because this is a very good initiative by government. And recently, I was in one of the conferences where I saw a young IAS officer who actually kind of has done his in district the entire automation at that level. It was his personal initiative, but it's a great thing. So we get 500 people like him, then we are done in 2 years. But I'm just saying 5 years to 7 years is the time where we should have probably a national data repository, which we have been talking for 20 years. So these are my views, Deepak.
Amazing, Sudhir. So you're saying really the next Aadhaar UID will become a Ayushman Bharat card possibly in 5 years' time.
Yeah, if it doesn't
Our health
become,
record.
yeah, if it doesn't make a become, but the primary care and the secondary care probably will happen. Right now, the problem is we don't even know when a patient has come from a rural town to Delhi. He might have money, but he may not remember what ailments they went through. But if there is a primary and secondary disease, management will become easy, and that's where the 70% issue lies.
Yes, very, very interesting, Sudhir. Thanks for sharing that. I think I know we are pretty much on the hour, but I'm tempted to ask some last questions, which are really more from the viewpoint of, as consumers of healthcare, we are all aging ourselves, and we keep observing this around us. So I must ask you, Purav, as a consumer of healthcare, all of us, I mean, there are certain holy grails of medicine, and all these advances, yes, we'll get connected, we'll get monitored, we'll get predicted. But I mean, is the holy grail of medicine cures for diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and so on? Do you see that happening in the next 3 to 5 years? Do you see that beyond that?
I think it's it would be really wishful thinking to see that we achieve that holy grail. But this is a more complex cycle than that, Deepak, because with everything else, we also want to live longer, and we also want to live healthier. But now as we live longer, it's harder to live healthier. And then we also want to live a more meaningful life. So new dimensions keep getting added, which means in some sense, we'll all stay in business for much longer than 3 to 5 years. But definitely there will be new therapies coming to market, which will make quality of life better, which will at least start providing some solution to Alzheimer's, which does not exist today or exists in a very weak way. My grandmother has been going through Alzheimer's for the last 2 years, and we know there is nothing we can do except for just watch, right? And historically, that was the case for Parkinson's, but now there is some intervention and quality of life could be improved to a good extent. So there are new treatments which are coming. Reaching the holy grail seems very far, where you could actually cure these diseases with one shot, completely reverse these diseases. That will take time. In general, it's also against principles of physics. Like it says, like there is unlimited amount of entropy can't survive within a limited amount of space, right? So eventually your body does decay and you have to face aging, but we would delay it, we will work on quality of life. So I see a lot of exciting progress, but perhaps also a long way to go as we think of it as consumers, as we think of putting ourselves in those shoes when we will have to get those treatments.
Thanks, Purav. And I know we can probably go on for a long session on this subject of longevity, and you tried to sow the seeds there, showing a closet physicist, apart from being a doctor. But let me pause. I think it's been a fascinating discussion with all of you. And let me now pause and see whether our audience has some questions. I know there's so much food for thought. Let me pause and see whether there are questions. Payal and Archana, if you could help. And audience, please, you can unmute yourself, or there are some messages I'm seeing coming. Payal, you want to read out the questions that have come in?
So one question that has come in, as we all know that inflation worldwide is at its peak, and India is a country where majority of population is middle class. Will these digital technologies, biotech advancements, actually be beneficial or affordable to the people at the grassroots levels in our villages, etc.? Anyone of you
You
all?
take this one first.
No, it will definitely be useful. See, again, everybody in remote villages today uses a phone. And I think phone is the most cheapest form of communication. Think of a situation like, let's go to early 2000, when somebody used to fall sick in a village. They will hire a van, they come to a nearest city, they go back, they'll probably send 10,000 rupees in the transport, and they realize a very minor ailment, which could, I mean, they say, oh my God, I just needed this one capsule. Of course, doctor has played a role in diagnosing the disease. So I think in the primary care, it is definitely going to save a lot of money, time. Like the Zoom call, I mean, today we are 40 of us connected. Otherwise, we take a big conference hall in Mumbai, 20 people taking flight. And, the quality of knowledge sharing has become easier. We are learning faster. Similarly, in the healthcare also. And actually, in a country like India, it is best thing to happen to us. Today, a truck driver has a better mobile probably than a CEO of a company sometimes, because it's a need of this thing. They need to see Google Maps. So I personally feel the mobile device will become also in some way a huge deliverer of primary issues, which may not need an active doctor participation. It needs a guidance and monitoring. Second part becomes for comorbid situations where people had to travel out of their remote villages. The monitoring is becoming much easier. We are in fact saying now, and there is one thing which very important topic is, whatever said and done, India has the best doctors, but we still lack the number of doctors. So what technology has helped us is, and in few fields like ICU management, or you take in nephrology, where it was very difficult to find specialists, they can actually monitor remotely, and hence the patient care is improving through the paramedics. So that also is a big cost saver. Somebody doesn't have to travel to a large ICU. They can be a nursing home in a smaller town, but being monitored by a senior doctor, and technology has enabled it. So I'm pretty sure with all the digital health and the initiatives what private sector is taking and government is becoming an enabler, I personally feel that will definitely lead to huge advantage monetarily for a patient also. And there is a very big subject on the healthcare economics. We are seeing the wage loss because of ailment of a family member. If somebody parents were sick in a small village, son will take a leave. He might be a daily labor guy. He comes to a large city. He loses that earning also. But those models will get validated as well as established over the next 5 to 10 years. But I would definitely say that the beginnings has been good. Whatsoever bad COVID has been, I think it has taught us the lessons, and it has also taught us how to focus on the quality of life and hopefully healthy longevity, as I say.
Thanks, Sudhir. On that uplifting note, I think I wanted to call a close, but I see another question that has come in, which is a fairly long question. One sec. Oh, this is one of those controversial questions.
I can't see it, so maybe.
Let me. Okay, I think if you have a few minutes, let me go through this. I think this has been the subject of endless debates on. So, do you think the SARS-CoV-2 virus has been created in the lab, considering the virus contains unusual features and genetic sequences? And do they signal that it was engineered by humans? Also, do you think that this is a test creation and more powerful variants may be released as a form of bioterrorism? So I think this is on a, wouldn't have wanted to end on this one, but let's hear some nuggets from Purav on this.
I mean, very likely, right, that it could have been created in a lab, and you have to understand that everything created in lab is not for bad purposes. A lot of viruses and their variants are created in lab. It's a natural research process, because that's how you research and identify antidotes ahead of time. That's how you identify vaccines. That's how you prepare for bioterrorism as well. Will there be bioterrorism, or is there a looming threat for it? Sure, there is. Are people working on solving it? Definitely they are. And if this particular virus has been created in a lab by a human or through some natural process, it's irrelevant in that sense, right? It is here and we have to solve it. And over a period of time, improve research process, improve security, safeguard ourselves against bioterrorism. How this got created is valuable for academic purposes, but not for solving it, at least in my opinion.
So I just want to say, we actually don't know what is the source of virus or whatever happened. But I think the way humanity has responded to it, this has also led to a huge confidence in the human race. Because if somewhere in January, February of 2021, was it 21, 22, we don't even want to remember those days, when the Delta wave came in, we all were worried about our own existence, and nobody saw which country is making vaccine, which is rich, poor, developed, developing. Nobody saw. So I think rather than focusing on where it came or whether it will come again, I think we have developed a robust mechanism now nationally and internationally to handle it. And we all should be happy we all are alive to be on this Zoom call. Maybe otherwise we would have been having this in heaven or hell, you know.
Yeah, Sudhir, absolutely. Sudhir and Purav, thanks for reaffirming that faith in problem-solving capabilities that we all have as a race. But thanks, I think it's been fascinating. Any other question, we'll have to wait for Future of Healthcare 2.0. But I'll now hand over, I know we're about 10 minutes over, back to my co-founder, Shanu Malgani, to share the vote of thanks. Over to you, Shanu.
Yeah, I'm here. And Sudhir, for a fascinating session. You've covered an amazing breadth of complex topics and made it accessible to all of us, from digital health, AI, biotech, to public health infrastructure in India, to what we can expect as consumers of healthcare. We are grateful for your insights. A few themes, insights that stuck with me. In COVID, we had about 7 million doctors in the world. Recommended book for all of you to read, Survival of the Sickest. And the skills required for future doctors will be different. Yeah, I'm sure our audience today, which includes our network of experts, clients, entrepreneurs, professionals, and students, would all have some meaningful takeaway from this session. Thank you, participants, for joining us and making this a lively session and engaging one too. Do write in if you'd like to connect with our experts or would like more specific insights on this topic. Thank you all once again and have a great evening. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Purav. Thanks, Sudhir. Lovely having you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.